Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeRSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeRSC columnists, staff writers, and editorial board. We start with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. First, let's meet this week's panel, Marc Kulkin, WeRSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, and WeRSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge. And I'm Greg Katz, your host and moderator of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeRSC columnist who writes the obvious and not so obvious, and IMHO Sunday. WeRSC publisher and editor Eric McKinney is on assignment this week. All right, before we begin this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here is the latest USC football news as of this taping. It was reported on Sunday that Pitt Panther All-America wide receiver. Well, we'll get to that in a second. One moment, everybody. Hold on.
Is that breaking news, Greg? Is that what that is?
That was actually that was a legendary Hall of Fame reporter who probably is calling about some matters about what we're talking about. So let me just start over, forgive you for that. It was reported on Sunday that Pitt Panther All-America receiver Jordan Addison, the 2001 Biletnikoff Award winner, was in Los Angeles this weekend. And at the time of this taping of Inside the Trojans Huddle, there was no public information on whether Addison had placed his name in the portal or had committed to transfer to USC. One thing for sure we can agree on, the entire college football world is watching these developments closely. More on this topic and college football's reaction to it in the first quarter of the huddle. On Sunday morning, the Trojans got a commitment from class of 2023 three-star safety Christian Pierce of Rancho Cucamonga, California. Pierce, a 6'2", 180-pound safety, chose from a final three group of USC, UCLA, and Washington. Sunday, May 1st, by the way, was also the deadline to enter the NCAA's transfer portal and be immediately eligible for the 2022 season. There's been some confusion of what the deadline date meant. Players who have entered the portal by May 1st are immediately eligible to play next season. If they are a first-time transfer, those players that missed the deadline and are first-time transfers will have to apply for an NCAA waiver to be eligible in 2022. Players who have previously transferred must wait to be eligible at their new college destination. And last Friday, 6'6", 205-pound linebacker Eric Gentry from ASU, who was in the portal, announced that he would be attending USC. Gentry, who made freshman All-America with the Sun Devils last season, hails from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the NFL held their 7 rounds of drafting, and 3 Trojans were taken in Las Vegas, with wide receiver Drake London selected 8th overall in the first round by the Atlanta Falcons. The Trojans have now produced 84 first-round draft picks and a total of 519 draft selections. More specifics on the overall Trojan selections of the draft later in this broadcast. And finally, the Trojans have announced a change in the 2023 schedule. USC will open 2023 in week 0 against the San Jose State Spartans in the Coliseum on Saturday, August 26th. Week later than most teams, San Jose State replaces BYU, which is moving to the Big 12, and conference necessities require BYU to withdraw from the scheduled game, which was scheduled for late November. And once again, friends, WeRSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. We appreciate and encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber button, and please give us a like. We appreciate that. And a reminder, it's all free. So with that in mind, let's get started. First quarter. Time for the kickoff. Here, panel, is the questions and the topic. Many in the college football world are accusing the USC Trojans and head coach Lincoln Riley of player tampering and trying to buy players through the NIL. Football analyst and former Florida State quarterback Danny Cannell tweeted, quote, "I think it's great for CFB if USC is good. I think it's awful for CFB how they're going about trying to get it done. Stealing players from other teams. Come on, bro. I know you guys have always been shady, but this is a whole new level. USC's Matt Leinart responded back to Cannell by tweeting out, "You seem to be spending a lot of your time worrying about the good old Trojans. Thanks, bud." All right, panel. Is the national controversy really about the Trojans stealing players and or flexing their NIL muscles? Or does it go deeper than that? Marc Kulkin, as always, you're our leadoff hitter. Tell us what you think. I know I almost came out with Hitler. Is that what I said?
You didn't almost.
You did
almost.
You went full.
Well,
you went full Adolf.
Well, you know,
called it the leadoff Hitler.
Well, no. You know, Coach McKay used to say, "Close is only good at hand grenades and horseshoes." So, Mark, I apologize.
That's okay. The irony from you to me on that comment is hysterical.
I know where it's going on that one. We'll leave it alone.
Hey, there are no rules.
What do you think? Are people picking on the Trojans?
No, I think, look, it's much deeper, but obviously USC is the prettiest girl in the room. And she's gotten dressed up and she's ready to show off now. So, yeah, you know what? I understand Danny using USC as his, muse to kind of get his message out there. But I agree with him. It's much deeper because, people saw what happened before when USC was good and they were kind of using the whole NIL before it was, legal. The sidelines were filled with, celebrities, and that scares the heck out of people when they can't compete with that. Right now, whomever shows up on the USC sideline, there's a good chance that they can say to a player, "Hey, you know what? You want to be in my next TV commercial, or I got a product I want you to hawk for me." You're not going to get that at other programs. So USC is in that unique position that they see what can happen when there's no rules in place. And that scares the hell out of everybody, including Danny Cannell. So where you had, the Alabamas of the world who have, look, it's no secret, the SEC has been paying players for years and decades and, since the game's been played. Now, you have USC who is coming off a 4-8 season and they're getting the same elite quality players transferring to their program that Alabama's getting in the offseason. That doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So obviously the first thing is USC's paying players. Sure they are, whatever. We've heard this tired trope before. Let's just hope Lincoln Riley can back it up now with some wins. And it's fun to be hated again.
Look at that. Look how Mark is so happy about that. It's fun to be hated again.
It is. It just feels natural.
Well, let's go to Mr. Arledge. Now, just to alert viewers along the network, Chris is going to spend some of his time on the Musings with Arledge commentary when we get to the fourth quarter on some of this more specifically on the subject. But Chris, is it good to be hated again?
Yeah, it's great. Everybody loved us when our head coach was a guy who would have been Peter principled out as an 8th grade gym teacher. Then everybody was very excited about us. Now they're unhappy. I'll talk about Jordan Addison later, as you said, because I think there's an issue here that is bigger than USC that's freaking people out for a very good reason. So I want to talk instead right now about USC and whether or not and why people hate USC football. Part of it is that if you're successful, people hate you. If you ask college football fans who they hate, you're going to get a lot of Alabamas and Ohio States. You're going to get Notre Dames. You're going to get programs that have won. Nobody ever says Rice, right? Because no one cares. I mean, well, you care, Greg. You follow the closely, but nobody else cares. And so that's part of it. But there's also a cultural component to it. And you probably remember in the Pete Carroll days, every time we would play a team from the Midwest or the South, there was all this talk about how, USC can't match up with the physicality of Iowa or Auburn or whoever it is, because USC is from the West Coast. They're soft surfer boys. They're laid back. They eat kale, right? There's this cultural component to the parts of the country that tend to be really good at football, which is mostly the South and to some extent the upper Midwest. culturally have a problem with California anyway. And so I think it does irk them a little bit more when USC is good, especially because a lot of these teams that have successful college football programs, Alabama, Oklahoma being a couple of examples, that's what they have, right? I mean, that is and I'm not saying those aren't nice places to live or they don't have nice people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that is the focus of just about everybody who lives in the state. It is the source of pride in that state. And it drives them nuts that LA, which has everything, right? It has the weather, and it has the beaches, and it has Hollywood, and it has all the beautiful women. It has all that stuff. And it drives them nuts that USC would also have college football. And worse, that USC can somehow combine college football with Hollywood, so that when USC is well run, it is the most glamorous and the most interesting program in the country. And it is. Alabama currently has the best college football program, probably of all time. They're amazing. They're consistently great recruiting and developing and winning. But you know what? They're still less interesting than Pete Carroll's Trojans were. When Pete Carroll and Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush rolled up in the stadium, it was like a big rock band was in town. And that's not the case with Alabama. And so, yeah, there's something about USC culturally that drives everybody nuts. And is it good to be hated again? Yeah, because the alternative was to be terrible longer. I mean, that was no fun. So, yeah, I would much rather be hated. And I doubt if anybody's that worried about being hated by Danny Cannell. So, look, at this point, the people who really need to fear USC is not so much the big time programs. Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and Georgia, I think they understand they're going to have to pull up another seat at the table for Lincoln Riley, and I think they're okay with that. Alabama's still going to be great, whatever USC does. And to win a national title, you're going to have to beat somebody that's really good, whether that's USC or Clemson. Probably doesn't matter that much to Nick Saban. It's not them. It's the second tier programs, both in the Pac-12, teams like Utah that are really well coached and have maximized what they're capable of, who are now looking at USC saying, now we have to deal with that. And teams like Pittsburgh, who are second-rate program. We'll talk about it in a second. I don't mean to insult them, but they're a second-rate program. And this whole Jordan Addison thing is now a shot across the bow of every program like that. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. So, yeah, great to be hated again. Hey, by the way, speaking of hated, sometimes I'll look at the comments after our show because it's nice feedback. I don't know if you guys did, but there were comments about me finally getting cleaned up for a program.
Yeah, what was that all about?
I don't know, but I couldn't let that pass.
Well, you know what? Like a bad kidney stone. I'll tell you what, I thought that was undue comments about you.
It seemed inappropriate to comment on my personal appearance. I don't know what it is. It's like, do I usually come on here looking like a homeless person? Or, I mean, remember when Saddam Hussein got dragged out of that hole? Is that what I usually come on looking like? I mean, I don't know. And the thing was, it wasn't just one person, because they made the comment and then it got a series of likes. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I disappoint your aesthetic standards, America. I don't know what to say, but it was offensive.
Look, everything's getting more expensive, including everybody's standards, Chris. So I guess
yeah.
Well, college football is finding out how much more expensive it is to compete with USC now. So that's one thing that's come out of this.
Well, I will say this. First of all, Danny Cannell. Now he plays at Florida State under Bobby Bowden. Really? Come on. You're gonna point to. Didn't we see this act before? We point over in college basketball. Used to be we point over at UNLV with Jerry Tarkanian. Well, everyone else was cheating. And look, the college football world, honestly, just hated USC under Pete Carroll. They hated him because they couldn't match up, as Chris has already said, on and off the field, the sidelines, the beach, everything. And Pete was doing it, at a level that was actually a reminder of what USC can always be if you have the right person in there. But Danny Cannell, I mean, who the hell is Danny Cannell? I mean, I watched him play. You know what? He played with great teams and great players. Are we to think that they were just pure virgin when it came to off the field activities and money and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sorry, college football is not the Vatican. It is a way of life, but for him to throw that down, I just, it's almost like, really, come on, Danny, you got to be better than that. But USC checks all the boxes. We've already talked about that. But how come nobody was screaming bloody murder in the Southeast when that great wide receiver left Georgia and ends up at Alabama? That's okay. You know what it is? I'll tell you what it gets down to. All these schools have been coming to Southern California for the last 10 so years, plucking out really outstanding players. When we talk about SC, where's all the offensive linemen? Well, they're going to Ohio State, okay? Especially out of St. John Bosco and some of the other schools. And they've had a free reign at some of our very best players. I mean, we don't have to talk about the quarterbacks, but the pipeline is closing. Now the real fear is, just like the fear was when Carroll was in charge, Lincoln Riley can go to any place in the country and bring people into Southern California, and they're afraid of that. Didn't they make a rule for Pete Carroll that he couldn't go off of SC's campus and go to spring practice of high school teams around the country when he was really hot and heavy recruiting? The SEC was going crazy, so they had that rule that head coaches could not attend spring practices of high schools. And I can see what they're all lining up to do. They want football to be nothing west of the Mississippi. They don't want anything to do with it, basically, unless they absolutely have to. So, you know what? I think that they're just going to have to deal with it. I'm sorry. And I'm glad SC is doing what they're doing. But and the thing is Lincoln Riley did say, look, I don't take them off of your campus. I take them out of the portal. And that's the number one thing. What are the rules? There are no rules. There's going to be rules, but right now it is the Wild West. And SC's playing by the rules because there isn't any. So let's move on here, okay? And this kind of dovetails with what we're talking about, this transfer portal. The way it's set up with the deadline and so on and so forth. If you don't get your name in time, you're going to have to go to the NCAA for a waiver, and good luck on that. But it's a little confusing. When you look at it, guys, what adjustments would you make to improve the current portal transfer rules in general? So, Chris, why don't you start us off there? What would you maybe do differently? Wherever you want to take it, it's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody were to had the authority to make binding rules, I'm not sure who does right now, but if somebody had the authority to do it, I think you do it like you do with signing day, and you have a couple of windows for people to do it. I think that makes the most sense. But I don't know that it's such a big deal. I mean, most guys are going to transfer either after the season or they're going to transfer after spring practice. That's what most guys are going to do anyway. So I don't know that there's a problem. At least in terms of the timing, and you get one free transfer. I'm okay with that. I don't think much needs to be done to fix that. And so I think it's operating just fine. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I'm watching my team load up on a bunch of really good players. It's harder for Pittsburgh to say that these days. But even so, I think
Chris,
the rules are fine.
let me ask you a question, Chris.
Yeah,
you're a college football aficionado.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, when did Pittsburgh have its last great team? I mean, great team.
It had to be the early 80s, right? Dan Marino. Maybe Tony Dorsett before that, the 70s. I don't know. Okay,
now that actually is the answer in the mid 70s, right? Yeah. Tony Dorsett, and they won the national championship, running out of basically a veer. But really, that's it. I mean, even Dan Marino had his moments at Pitt. I guess you could say Aaron Donald played at Pitt, right? But he's
Fitzgerald.
Okay, Fitzgerald, good point. But as a team, not as an individual,
no,
they've been nothing. I mean,
Donald Revis.
What's that?
Donald Revis.
Okay.
Well, they've had certainly they've had some good players, and you should, because there's some good
whatever his first name.
Pennsylvania, Darrell Revis. Yeah, I suppose Pittsburgh was last good back when UCLA was last good. I don't know.
Wow, now that's a real hard question. I don't think we even want to go there because I can't remember the last time UCLA, unless it was Gary Beekman. Well, no, John Shara. John Shara was good.
I read in the history books that before I was born, UCLA was good enough that they won half of a national title. But I'm only 48 years old, so I wasn't around to see that.
Greg was.
You're amazing, Kulkin. Again, I'm taking away your Canner's Deli privileges.
Okay.
I'll say this about this topic. Can the NIL have a salary cap? Or is that legally, like, you can't tell players how much they can make on their own?
Here's the issue with your second quarter question, Greg. I'm fine with having the May 1st deadline. Make yourself known. You're in the portal. That's fine. But now you've got, 30 days to find a landing spot. And this goes back to our opening question. What scares the hell out of everybody, including the other blue blood programs, is you're recruiting high school recruits and you're developing them for 1 or 2 years. Well, now all of a sudden these guys become Jordan Addison and they're like, hey, you know what? I'm good enough to get bigger exposure than playing at Pitt. Let me take my wares out to Hollywood. That's what this whole thing's all about. It's having players who are good enough to play at their existing schools, but are saying, hey, you know what? I'm good enough to go play out there and cash in. This is what it's all about. This is what Danny Cannell is really harping about and what scares everybody and why, being the prettiest girl in the room all the time intimidates people. And it's why sometimes they go without dates.
Is that true, Chris?
I've never been the prettiest girl in the room, but I'll take Marc's word for it. But
hey, don't you think Marc looks good today? No cap. Hey, did you go to like a hairstyrist or something?
I think Marc saw the comments about my appearance online and he got nervous. He decided to take preemptive action.
Somebody told me that you look like Christopher Reeves in Superman. Have you ever been told that?
Oh,
I saw a comment like that.
I can see that.
No, that's better than Arledge looks like a homeless guy. Look, to answer your question though, there are two ways that you could have an NIL salary cap or NIL regulation. You could either do it through legislation, which really needs to be done by Congress so that it would be uniform. Or you can make the players employees and have them unionized and have a collective bargaining agreement. Those are really the only two routes, because otherwise whatever NCAA rules or I think conference rules that they try to impose are likely going to be antitrust violations. So that's the issue. What the schools obviously want there to be legislation. But I don't know that Congress is going to be kind to the schools if Congress can actually get around to doing it. So I think ultimately the players will become employees and unionized, and there will be some schools that don't want to participate in that. I mean, Rice maybe would be a school like that. Maybe even Stanford. Actually, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But for the others, that's what's going to happen, and the players will not only get NIL revenue, but they will get a piece of the gate and television revenues too. But that will at least have rules in place that the colleges can live with, and they will still continue to rake in their hundreds of millions. That's probably what's going to happen at some point. I don't know, 3 to 5 years from now. That's my guess.
I think we can all agree that there has to be rules. There has to be windows of whatever they're going to do. I don't see how they can put a cap on the NIL. And I'll say this, and I said it last week, I think, when you get NIL people like Oregon did, where they had Phil Knight and all their group, believe me, knowing the people I know at SC, of the high rollers of boosters, if they collectively get together, nobody's going to outspend USC. If SC, these are competitive men, successful men, people that own, real estate, high-end real estate. I mean, it's a game for them. It's an off but on the field game. Like, I'm going to beat Phil Knight. He's not going to outbid this guy for a player. We want him. It's almost like the game within the game. And that's why I was wondering about a capping on the NIL, but I don't think constitutionally, legally, you can do that. on something that isn't directly part of the scholarship or anything like that. So it's going to be an interesting concept. But right now, like we all agree, it's anything goes. All right, we ready to move on? I am. All right, here we go. It's halftime. And here's your question, panel. This is kind of a fun one. In a month, you can bet that all the college football magazines will be hitting the stands. My question to you guys is, how many magazines do you traditionally buy? Which ones and why do you buy them? And which ones would you recommend if somebody says, which magazine would give me the best bang for the buck? So, Mark, I know you're a huge college football fan. Do you buy the magazines? And if you do, which ones do you get?
I don't. Right.
Go to your room, Mark. That'll be enough out of you.
I knew that was going to shock you. Here's the thing, Greg, all this information is right there at my fingertips online. I mean, newspapers are dead. So, I mean, what's the difference? Literally, before Phil Smith gets his stuff out there,
Phil Steele
gets all of his stuff out there. That just shows you how much I respect the industry, right? It's online already. There's no reason for me to wait. There's no reason for me to go get that, that magazine soft copy version of a thick phone book when all I need to know is, 5 seconds of typing and I've got all that information right there at my fingertips. Sorry, I hate to burst your bubble, but it's moved forward. Everything's online now.
So we have one person says, I don't do that. I don't do college football magazines. Arledge, do you do football magazines or no?
Not anymore. I used to, but I used to use a rotary phone too. I don't. I used to do the college football magazines in the days before the internet. I would get Athlons and Lindy's and Street and Smiths and whatever all the ones that were out there. I think Athlon was always my favorite. Or really, my favorite was whichever one had USC ranked the highest. That would be the one that I would buy first because that would make me happy. But I don't much anymore for the same reason that Mark doesn't, because the information is just easier to get out there elsewhere. And I can understand. I know some people like to read, like even when they read books, they don't want ebooks. They want to have a book in hand. So maybe if you just really like holding a magazine, then it makes sense. But no, I don't buy them anymore. I stopped a number of years ago.
Well, I am an old traditionalist. I've been getting college football magazines since the mid 60s when Street and Smith was the standard bearer. And I'll always forget a picture of USC guys on the cover. And like Mark makes a very good point. I mean, a lot of this stuff is almost old news by the time it hits the stands. But there's just something about it that when I see it, I know football season's almost here. I have used it as reference materials early in the season when I'm writing. I like to see other people's opinions that I may not know. A lot of it has feature stories that I enjoy reading. I like seeing the rankings of, I used to say the really good football magazines for college also have a back section of high school rankings for recruits. And, it's just fun to compare I like the competition between the magazines. So I will plead guilty that I probably get 4 or 5 of them. I used to look forward to going to Barnes and Noble and seeing if they're on the stands and how depressed I'd be if a certain one that I wanted wasn't on the stands. So now I just go online and order them, have them delivered. Now, when you belong to the Football Writers Association, sometimes they have deals with Phil Steele. The only thing I don't like about Phil Steele is the print is so small that I feel like I need the Palomar telescope to read a paragraph, and I hate that. But, as far as a ton of information, it does have that. But sometimes I think you get information overload, but that's, credit to him. He's got a lot of stuff in there. I think Athlon I used to like, but then I thought they took a dip in their credibility with some of the stuff because they always wanted to be the first one on the block to be out there. And then I said, well, Lindy's, I've always liked Lindy's. Lindy's seems to be a pretty broad section of both national and specific Pac-12 stuff. So,
the Playboy All-American.
I miss the Playboy All-America team.
I'll invest in that.
Does the Pony Express drop those magazines off for you, Greg?
You know, it's amazing because the association where I live actually has a Pony Express station with a barn in the back. It's amazing. So I don't
that does
deliver
not
my mail.
surprise me.
Well, you know, when you live out where I live, you know, that's what you see. Plenty of. So, so that's kind of the way it looks. So, all right. Well, for those of you that I think this is really a cross section of where we are. You got a traditionalist like me who's older, younger guys on there who say, I don't need to go do that. I can save money and I can see it on sites like wearesc.com. What was that, a shameless plug or what? Okay, let's move on here. Before we begin the second half, a reminder that you're watching or listening to wearesc.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's WeRSC panelists include Marc Kulkin and Chris Arledge. I'm Greg Katz. We also encourage you to check out wearesc.com, part of the On3 network. Become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and Trojans athletics. And as a bonus, check periodically with the site. They always have some really good deal to get you started. I know a lot of my friends, and I'm kind of improvising here, you know, say, well, I don't want to spend that money. I say, well, wait a minute. Divide it up into months, then divide it up into weeks, divide the weeks into days. I said, you spend more at the gas pump twice in 2 week period than you do to get the subscription. And, you know, by and large, when they do get a subscription, they never regret it. So folks, take a look and see what you think. I think you'll become hooked like most people are and really enjoy the product. So with that, let's move on here. We kick off the second half and third quarter with this. Panel, the 2022 NFL Draft has come and gone, and here's what we know. The NFL Draft was completed Saturday in Las Vegas. We saw 3 Trojans drafted in the first 7 rounds. Just as a quick refresher, those drafted, round 1, wide receiver Drake London, number 8 overall by the Atlanta Falcons. Round 2, outside linebacker Drake Jackson by the San Francisco 49ers. And round 6, running back Keontae Ingram by the Arizona Cardinal. And prior to this broadcast taping, there were 5 known Trojans that signed as free agents. Those known Trojans that signed as free agents are as follows: Isaiah Palomau with the Raiders, Isaac Taylor-Stewart with the Cowboys, Eric Kromanoke with the Chargers, Chris Steele with the Steelers, and Kenai Malga with the Atlanta Falcons. Panel, your question: what Trojans drafted or undrafted surprised or disappointed you? What free agents do you think will actually make a roster? Chris, your take.
I don't think any of it was surprising. I think we pretty much nailed it last week when we were talking about what was going to happen. Look, what's disappointing is how few USC players are getting drafted these days, and how few of them are in the upper rounds. I mean, if you want to look at the collapse of USC football, even if you don't look at the records, just look at the draft results. I mean, it's been from where the program was in the Pete Carroll days to where it is now. USC produces draft choices right now like Oregon State does, right? I mean, it's or Kansas. So that shows the utter absolute failure of the last regime. But we already know that. We also know that that's going to turn around dramatically because USC is recruiting at a much different level now. And so, yeah, that's what's disappointing is how few USC Trojans are getting selected these days. But that's going to change. And so that's something to look forward to.
Marc, what surprised you? What disappointed you? What surprised me is how high Velus Jones got drafted. I mean, we can take partial credit for 4 of his 6 years in college, right? Look, USC is just a symptom of the Pac-12. The Pac-12 conference as a whole had 25 players drafted. UCLA led the conference with 6 players. The 2 teams who played in the conference championship each had 1 player drafted, Oregon and Utah. That tells you something. So, yeah, Chris said it, there were no surprises. I guess the biggest surprise is how bad the conference as a whole is, as far as the NFL is concerned, drafting players. There's going to be plenty of free agent signings. I'm a little, I guess, sad that Vavae Malapai hasn't signed on with anybody yet. team captain, gave everything, runs hard. You think he'd be the prototypical special teams guy, hasn't signed on anywhere yet. Drake London, first guy off the board, as far as receivers go. The draft is what it was. The Pac-12 as a whole just is pathetic. And when UCLA is leading the conference with draft picks and your tight end is your marquee guy, that's it. I mean, yeah, there's no surprises here, Greg.
Well, I'll tell you what, to me, there was vindication. Some of the USC players that didn't get picked, out of kindness of my heart, I'm not going to mention a particular player, but I thought this player was so overrated in his career. And, a lot of times people say, well, some players, they seem to get drafted high based on potential, which is unproven talent. But this particular player didn't get drafted, and I thought it was a real wake-up call. So what I did is I went back to look at the actual NFL scouting reports of this player, and it was not very complimentary. It was everything that I thought I was watching and evaluating. And this player is really going to have to step up to the table. Now, Mark stole a little of my thunder on Favai Malapay. I really think he can play in the NFL if he's with the right teams, special teams. Maybe the offenses of today are not quite matched up with his skill level, but I think he's good enough to play. Now, the guy I really hope makes it in the NFL as a free agent is Eric Kromeno. I think I can't imagine how happy you would be if you're a free agent that you could sign with the Chargers and stay locally. I thought that was good. I was a little surprised with Drake Jackson, that the 49ers picked him, but good for him. I mean, he gets to stay on the West Coast. His family can watch him play. They're in the same division, but I think he's got a lot to prove. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see that video that the NFL did on Drake London and his family's message to each other, but it was really touching. I mean, I put it in my column on Sunday, and if you actually watched it, I mean, it was really heartfelt. From his sister was just like, "You're my idol." There was nothing phony about it. I mean, and to see his reaction to tell his family how he appreciated their support. I always feel bad for a player like London, who's such a great player, such a team player, and had to go through that experience of what happened last year, being hurt and what have you. And then I'm going to myself, now, how's a kid from Moore Park going to adjust going to the Atlanta Falcons? And so I'm saying to myself, well, if he can just do 2 or 3 years or 4 years, maybe he can get back to LA area with the Rams or the Chargers and, continue his career, because most of the big money is on the second contract. So, I think you all touched on it. The Pac-12, great talent, a lot of the great have in terms of quantity. They go to Ohio State, they go somewhere else. And we've had trouble keeping them in, but I think it's about to change. Now, one thing that's about to change is the mood of everything, because now it's that time as we go into the fourth quarter with the favorite part of the show for some people.
Look at it.
It's not even a candle anymore, man.
It's just a tiny
It's a
mound
blob.
of wax.
It's
Yeah.
just goo.
Oh boy.
Now, I'm just going to hold this for a second. For those of you that are listening, I do have the torch for the Coliseum. It's lit up. We call it the Chris Arledge Coliseum torch in honor
We
of.
don't. No, we don't. You do.
Now, come on.
If
Don't be
people
humble.
want to leave a comment, this is the perfect subject to comment on.
All right. Now, in lieu of the traditional USC marching band's rendition of the William Tell Overture, we now bring you the Inside the Trojans Huddle version of Musings with Arledge, with Chris Arledge. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. I want to talk about this Jordan Addison situation a little bit, because I know the entire college football world is eager to see what's going to happen. And people who aren't very sharp, like Danny Cannell, like to send out tweets where they're making accusations without evidence. Let's start with the basics. There's no way in the world Lincoln Riley actually talked to Jordan Addison before he went in the portal. Riley's too smart for that, and he didn't have to. It's also the case that if Jordan was finding money in LA that made a transfer appealing, he also wasn't talking to Lincoln Riley, because that's not the guy you talk to get the money. That's not what the story's about. Pat Narduzzi is upset, and I don't blame him for being upset, but it's not because of tampering. That's silly. What I think Narduzzi is doing is he's trying to tell people, if you come and take my established players from me, I'm going to do everything I can to make your life difficult, including leaking allegations of tampering. So stay away from my guys. Fine. Here's the thing. The reason this is such a big deal is because now, with the combination of the free transfer and the NIL, the mid-sized programs are really in a lot of trouble. It used to be that they knew they couldn't compete with the big programs when it came to recruiting high school talent, right? They couldn't. Pittsburgh's not going to compete with Ohio State or Alabama or Oklahoma or USC for five-star players. They may every once in a while get one, but that's not what they can do. But it was also the case that if you're an excellent coach who's really good at spotting talent and really good at developing, that you could craft for yourself a good program that wins a lot of games and goes to good bowl games by finding the overlooked talent, right? Jordan Addison was a 3-star guy in high school. He's clearly better than that. His ranking was clearly too low, but you could find those guys. Campbell at Iowa State does that. Whittingham at Utah does that. I don't know that Narduzzi's done a ton of that, but they were pretty good last year, and I think that's what he's trying to accomplish. Bill Snyder at K-State did that forever, mostly through the junior college ranks, because he could not compete at K-State for the elite talent, but he had a great eye for talent, and he was a great developer of football players, and so he'd find the guys that slipped through the cracks, and he could build a top 10 team with it. The problem is now, if you're a guy like Kyle Whittingham or Pat Narduzzi, and you look at it and say, wait a minute. So if I go find one of those guys and I develop them and they become an elite player, a superstar player, now I have to worry about the major programs coming and stealing them away from me. And the answer is yes, you do have to worry about that, because that's the world you live in now. I don't blame Narduzzi for being unhappy about being a farm team for USC. Just like the Kansas City Royals don't want to be a farm team for the New York Yankees. But life is tough. And that's what you are now, Pat. You are now a farm team for the big programs. It's not just USC. Alabama is pulling out elite talent through the transfer portal. Everybody's doing it. It's going to continue to happen. And the free transfer plus the NIL just means that now there's yet one more area where the second and third tier programs cannot compete with the elite programs. Pittsburgh can't get the guy the same money that he can get at USC or Texas. They can't. And so they're going to lose him. And you know what? That's sad for Pitt. It's not sad for college football players. I mean, think about it. Jordan Addison doesn't want to be at Pittsburgh right now anyway. You know where he wants to be? He wants to be playing in the NFL, but he doesn't have that option because he's not allowed to go to the NFL yet. So he has to stay in college for another year. And so you say, well, should he stay at the program he's at, where he now has a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback? He's going to have maybe a decent team around him, but he's going to be playing for a mediocre program in mediocre bowl games. And guys at the bigger schools are going to be making a lot more money, despite the fact that he is better than they are. Is that fair for him? Seems to me that it's not. It's just like when free agency hit professional sports. Yes, the owners hated it. The fans weren't that excited about it, but it sure was great for the players. I'm on the side of the players. I'm glad that these guys finally have an opportunity to do what every other student in college can do, which is say, I don't really like to be here. I'd like to go somewhere else and get up and leave. I'm glad they can do that. I'm glad they can do what everybody else in every other industry can do, which is make money when you're worth a lot of money on the open market. I'm glad they're able to do that. I understand why Pitt's upset. And it's not just Pittsburgh. It's all of these programs that are looking at it saying, my old way of doing things, to go find the unheralded guys who I think can be superstars and build a team around them, all that entire business model is now threatened. It is. And that's sad for those guys. It's not sad for me. I can't wait to see Jordan Addison playing for USC. If in fact this is what happens, and I think it will, I can't wait to see him catching passes next year in the Coliseum. I'm looking forward to USC putting the best offense in the country on the field, and I think that's going to be a part of it.
Very good. Now, Chris, I just want to clarify, you're not the type of person who likes to pour salt on snails and watch them dehydrate.
What makes you think I would be, Greg?
Well, I don't know. After that was really hurtful what you said about Pat Narduzzi and some of the things. I mean, do you step on anthills with ants too, and trample them and say, I'm in control of this?
I mean, not for fun, but if I'm walking across an anthill and I see lots of ants, I am going to stomp it. Wouldn't you stomp it? Especially if it's the fire ants.
You know what Marc would do? Marc would take out a magnifying glass and see if the sun could hit them, and see if he could just watch them. By the way, Marc,
mea culpa. I hate bugs.
Marc, what were you putting in your mouth while Chris was giving this great dissertation? Skittles. All right. Because maybe we could have Skittles as a sponsor or something. I thought maybe,
it worked for Marshawn Lynch, man. Why not?
All right, guys, let's head on to the fourth quarter here. The Trojans play 5 road games in 2022. Those road games are at Stanford, at Oregon State, at Utah, at Arizona, and at UCLA. If someone asks you what road game they should attend, and we'll say one game, road game only, which game would you recommend, Marc Kulkin?
At Notre Dame. You didn't list that one, but that would be the one.
That's because we're not playing at Notre Dame this year.
Chris, do you want to set them straight? It's fine with me, but
I mean, no, I don't. I don't want to have to do this. There are 5 away games. He just listed them. Can you pick one of the 5?
Yeah, 2022, Marc.
Okay.
I'll try to make that an easier question next week. But
I appreciate it, Greg. I really do. I always have fun at Stanford.
Okay. So I've never been on a road game. Why do I want to go see Stanford? Why would I want to? What is the big allure of going to see Stanford?
It's the 2 private schools in the conference. For whatever reason, there's USC has the people perceive USC as being arrogant. Stanford takes it to a whole nother level. They really don't care about football, but they do care about beating USC. So it's just a weird vibe when you're up there, because they want to beat you, and for whatever reason lately they have been beating USC the last 20 years. It's pretty been even, I guess, if we were to look at the records. And before San Francisco, the city itself was going through this, it was the weekend. It was just a fun place to go. It was a food place, good bars. It was just a fun place. It was one of my favorite away weekends in the conference. But again, this is why I stepped and went colored outside the lines. The road games in this conference aren't great. So every other year we get to go to Notre Dame. So if you're going to save your pennies, go to that game.
Notice how Marc, you're trying to get out of this Notre Dame thing. We're trying to stick to the question, would you please?
Look, Chris,
Chris, go ahead.
Marc is right that Notre Dame is the best road game. It just doesn't happen to be the game this year, so that's why his answer was nonsense. But look, there are two good options. One is Utah, because that's going to be the best game, and it's going to be the game. It's going to be the game of the year in the Pac-12 conference, I believe. But that's not the one I choose. If you'd never been to an away game, or especially a USC game, I'd say go to the Rose Bowl. Watching USC against UCLA in the Rose Bowl is pretty great. Now, it was better when both programs were good. But even now, to see both teams with the home jerseys, to see that setting, I mean, it's a beautiful place to be, historic stadium. If you've never been, that's the one I'd go to. That's a fun one.
It's kind of a swap meet, though, before you actually get inside the game. When was the last time you were actually at that game, Chris? Because it feels grimy and dirty until you're actually in your seat.
Well, it's grimy and dirty, yes. And the parking situation is a disaster. So if you're willing to walk, if you're willing to walk a mile or two, then you can park somewhere that's not terrible. Even with that being the case, though, still.
I agree with you.
As opposed to Stanford, look, the problem with the Stanford game is that you have a fan base that's largely lethargic, and then you have a Stanford offense that's painful to watch. I mean, that's not the game I'd choose. Although you're right, the Weekender's nice, but no, I think USC UCLA at the Rose Bowl.
I agree with you, Chris, wholeheartedly.
We're all shocked you agree with Chris.
No, I asked him the question is serious, because when you go to that game, there's a different vibe during tailgating at the Rose Bowl than at the Coliseum. Usually there's a very large police presence at the Rose Bowl because fights break out. People get eyes poked out. Fists are flying. I mean, it's dangerous. It's grimy. It's dirty.
Have you ever, wait a minute. You've seen someone's eyes get poked out?
I was just going to say, am I missing something?
What are you talking about?
Yes, I will go over. Yes, it happens.
You make it sound like a Viking camp.
Well, I'm going to have to say that I'm a little disappointed in my two intellectuals here. I thought you would really get more into the actual ambiance of where you were going, the actual full trip, not just the game, not just the campus, but what would I do besides the game when I go there? Obviously, the going to Stanford as opposed to Cal. Stanford's south of San Francisco, but I know if you go on the weekender, you go on a Thursday, come home on a Sunday, you can spend time at the sightseeing. You go eat by Fisherman's Wharf if you like that type of area, or go to Sausalito or the Tuberon, and a lot of those places. That's what I like about the road trips. The game itself is a game. I enjoy it. Utah, I agree with. If you have not been to Utah, it's a really interesting place. I would say go take a tour of the Mormon facility there just to see. I hate to use the term campus, but what it's like. It's kind of an interesting town. Honestly speaking, I think of all the views that I sometimes see when I'm at stadiums. If you're in the press box at Rice-Eccles Stadium and you look out, kind of like a little bit like if we're watching a game at Berkeley, beautiful view of the city because the stadium is kind of like on a hill at the top. So, and plus you got the mountains there, skiing if you like. So there's a lot of stuff to me when I think of road games. Actually, an annoying road game to go to, but it is interesting nonetheless, is to go to Corvallis in Oregon State. It is the worst parking ever to get off the freeway to get to the stadium. It's literally a 2-lane highway, which should take you 10 minutes, takes you probably an hour and 20 minutes at the least. But it's an interesting campus. I think the beauty about being in this business that we're in is a chance to go to all the Pac-12 stadiums, see what they're selling recruits on. Sometimes I fantasize, if I was a recruit, what am I looking at? What I see, like even Pullman, Washington, to me, there's a beauty about driving there. But would I want to go to school there for 4 years? But if I was picking a road game, I wouldn't pick UCLA because to me, when the Rose Bowl is only the Rose Bowl when SC's in it on January 1st. UCLA to me is, renting out the Rose Bowl because they can't build a place on campus because no one will.
They are in fact renting out the Rose Bowl. They don't own it. They do in fact rent it.
They do rent it out. Very good. That's why you had an office at Century City. Didn't you have a Century City office with your law office?
Still do. I'm not there very often, but that's where it is.
Well, and that's why I can see the success. Okay, Mark, you want to defend him? Go ahead.
No, I'm enjoying this. Continue.
I didn't want to get Mark because I knew he's going to pop another Skittle, and I didn't want to take away.
Out.
He's getting depressed. All right, let's get overtime.
I think Mark is stung a little bit like I am because you started your answer by saying how disappointed you were in us. That hurt a little bit. Well, I don't often do that to you, Greg.
Chris, at least he didn't call you Hitler. I mean, you got that going for you.
That's fair. He said, but he called you the leadoff Hitler, and I was up next. So maybe I was on deck Hitler. I don't know.
You guys are so warped. I don't know why people watch this show just to see you guys do your shtick.
Okay.
By the way, thanks to everyone, by the way, that are watching the show. Last week, we had over 4,300 people, and we greatly appreciate it. We hope we entertain you in some ways. I probably don't, but the other 2 or 3 have a way of keeping things rolling. All right, overtime questions. We'll keep the questions short. Those of you that have a question that you have for the panel or what have you, just go to the We Are SC message boards. There is a link there to give us your question. And of course, I guess it's only appropriate we start off with, we're gonna have just 2 questions today. This question is from El Sociolo Mi Expert. Here it is. You ready? Can Chris please explain once and for all to everyone how Oregon never was, is not, and never will be our rival at any level, let alone any sport? Reading content is not just from their sites, but even on here about the type of rivalry with Oregon is just ridiculous. And see, the words USC Trojans and Oregon and rivalry should never be in the same sentence. We have 2 rivals, Notre Dame and UCLA. Hopefully, Chris can find the words and take a deep dive into thoroughly explaining why this should never happen again. LOL. Thank you, and love all the work of all you guys provide. Fight on. Okay, Chris, response.
So he wants a deep dive and thorough. I'm not sure that I'm going to spend as much time on the topic as he wants, but I was a little bit surprised that apparently there are people that think that USC and Oregon are rivals. I didn't realize that. See, my understanding of a rivalry is where you have 2 equals who are competing for the same thing and have a history of going up against each other. Larry and Magic, rivalry. Ollie Foreman, rivalry. Mike Tyson, Pinklin Thomas, not rivalry. I'm not sure why anyone would think that USC and Oregon have a rivalry. We don't have a history of competing for the same things. We don't have and for the most part, for almost the entire time they've been in the conference, Oregon's just a team that you brush out of the way on your way to better teams on the schedule. So I did some research. I looked it up, and I noticed that Oregon actually does have a rival. Most people probably don't know this because they don't pay much attention to Oregon football. But if you Google it, you'll see they have a rival, and it's a team of equal standing in the college football world. It's a team that has often competed for the same thing that Oregon has, and that team is Oregon State. That Oregon State is Oregon's true rival. And I looked it up, and Oregon actually is doing pretty well against its rival. It has beat Oregon State 54% of the time historically. Now, that means that they've lost to Oregon State 46% of the time historically. Now, you might ask me, Chris, what other teams lose to Oregon State 46% of the time historically? And the answer is nobody. Nobody loses to Oregon State 46% of the time historically. Even Wazoo does better than that. And USC, Washington, UCLA, the other traditional conference heavyweights have destroyed Oregon State over the years, because Oregon and Oregon State have historically been competing to see who's going to be worst in the conference and who's going to be next to worst in the conference. So if you're really interested in Oregon football, and I'm not, but if you're interested in that and you're interested in Oregon's rival, go watch some old Oregon State football games. You'll see a lot of 2-8 versus 3-7 matchups. And I'm told that the games were very competitive and very spirited. So that's what you should be looking for.
All right, Mark, would you like to add on to that, to the answer to that question, or did Chris answer it thoroughly?
The question was asked specifically of Chris. There's no reason for me to inject anything here.
Well, I would be more comfortable with Chris's response if we hadn't lost to them the last 2 times we played them in the Pac-12 championship game, and I think one before that.
Side are you on, Katz? I mean, seriously, what side are you on?
I'm trying to be objective. I'm an SC person through and through, but I try to be objective about it. These glasses are not cardinal and gold. They are dark. They're my Steve Allen glasses. Of course, most of you don't know who Steve Allen was, so it doesn't make any difference. No, I mean, if I'm looking at people debating it, I mean, historically, no, you're absolutely right. but it irks me the last couple of times when we lose because it adds a little fuel to their argument. And, I will say this, rival. I mean, you can say anything you want, but they've plucked guys out of Southern California that had no business going up to Eugene. And that was an indication of SC's incompetence in who they selected as their head coach.
So when USC out recruited for DeAnthony Thomas when Pete Carroll was USC's coach?
Where did DeAnthony Thomas go to school?
My point being, Greg, every now and then they're going to get one guy. It's going to happen.
One guy?
Who else? Who was out recruiting Pete Carroll when Pete Carroll was at the top of his game? It's not like schools were coming in and doing it.
Okay, I'm not going to.
It happens,
Pete
Greg.
Carroll thing.
It happened.
What about Thibodeau?
It happened.
Yeah, no, look.
You're making a big mountain out of a tiny little mole. People are taking advantage of USC now because they suck. Well, they did.
What kind of an attitude is that? They suck.
Did I lie?
No, I'm not saying that you lied.
Look, Greg, my answer was tongue in cheek, obviously, but Oregon is not a rival. Look, if somebody else in the Big Ten beats Michigan 5 out of 7 years, it doesn't mean that they're Michigan's rival. Michigan and Ohio State have a long-time rivalry because they've been two programs that have been great competing with national championships for a very long time. USC and Notre Dame are rivals because for many, many years, they have been competing for national titles and Heisman trophies. There's a history there. Oregon is not USC's rival until they have, 3-4 decades of sustained success, and they don't have that. They've never had that. When USC completely fell on its face, and Washington had completely fallen on its face, and UCLA had completely fallen on its face, Oregon did a really nice job of becoming the best team in the conference and a second-rate team in the nation. That's what they did. That's good for them. That's way better than what they've done historically. But that's all it is. Oregon is second-rate. They'll probably go back to third-rate now that USC's decided they actually want to win football games again. And I'm looking forward to that because I don't like Oregon football and I don't like listening to their fans. I don't. So I can't wait until Oregon starts to lose again.
For all these perceived recruiting wins that they have, where are they in the NFL? I mean, I just pointed out to you, they made the championship game, conference championship game again, and they had one player drafted. USC sucked, and they had more players drafted.
Well, I'll give you.
It happens, Greg.
Are you into individual honors or team honors?
They work hand in hand. They work hand in hand, Greg. What's question 2 of overtime?
Now, I was just going to get. Now he wants to take over the show. All right, let's get to question number 2. I think that is a good idea. This is from Corona Trojan Fan. I noticed a lot of information on NIL considerations on On3 site. In particular, there was a list of donor-led collectives in which the Pac-12 seemed to have minimal representation, with only Arizona, Utah, Washington, and of course, Oregon, Nike appearing. Now, I realize that donor-led collectives may only be one way in which the NIL could be supported, and that USC seems to be doing okay with a number of players regarding the NIL with whatever their current scheme may be. But is there any current concerns that the state of California may not keep pace with certain other states, those in the SEC, Big Ten, or ACC, in how NIL is encouraged or uncontrolled going forward? Jump in, guys.
No, the concern seems to be otherwise. Ask Pat Narduzzi, right? Ask Danny Cannell. Everybody seems to be worried that USC is just throwing money around. So no, I don't think that's a concern. It looks to me like USC is going to be able to compete quite well in the NIL arena.
Yeah, California is pretty progressive as far as allowing anything to happen, or to at least to be tried. So yeah, they're not going to get in the way of anything.
No, I think that we're living a good state. They're gonna make things the way it really should be in most cases, especially when it comes to sports. So, on that note, guys, again, for those people that have an interest in asking our panel a question, go to the WeRSC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listenership. We love hearing from you. and we'll certainly tell it like it is, whether you agree or not. We'll just give you our opinion. So, okay, that wraps up this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Big thank you this week to our panelists, Marc Kulkin and Chris Arledge, and a special thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Until next Tuesday, this is your host, Greg Katz, reminding all of you to fight on, everybody.